Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Brooke Greening. She is a former counselor turned sales and marketing expert, and we'll learn from her about how to attract and close the right clients with authenticity and trust. We'll also learn how to handle objections, tell the right story, and grow our businesses, your business, without the sleazy tactics. Welcome to the show, Brooke.
Thank you so much, AJ. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Brooke. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. As I said, without the sleaze, we'll learn about selling without the sleaze. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Sure. Well, you know how for business owners, it's really hard sometimes because they get kind of stuck in the daily grind and they're trying to build momentum for their business and they just can't. And so our business is called Building Momentum Resources. And so we offer strategic planning, marketing consulting, and sales coaching to help jumpstart their business and be able to maximize their profits. And my role is I am the sales coach and marketing consultant side. So before we started our business, I was in sales and corporate training for about 20 years. And a lot of the time I was coming in and trying to help other businesses when they were getting stuck, when their sales processes were getting messed up. They weren't able to close on their sales conversations. I would come in, assess the problem, fix it, turn it around, train the next team, and out we would go. So that is my role now as our own company. So I love being able to come into businesses and help them to do that because I really do feel like everybody needs a little bit of help with sales, but a lot of times people don't necessarily want that help because they're really afraid what that's going to look like because there's just a lot of sleaze and manipulation and different things like that in the sales world, and people just don't want to learn that. And so I come in and bring in that authentic piece and help them with our service framework so that they can truly serve their customers in their sales conversations.
Absolutely, absolutely, Brooke. We'll come to the service framework also. But first, I want to understand what is the biggest difficulty for a salesperson in today's time? Whoever is making the sale, is it about the objections? Is it about the customer not having interest? Or is it the customer having past bad experience with companies like those? Bots have trolled him indefinitely. So in that, what are the biggest difficulties for a salesperson in today's time?
I would say one of the biggest difficulties, if we're talking about when they're having their sales conversation, one of those biggest difficulties is when objections are coming because they're not entirely sure how to be able to handle them because they don't want to be pushy. They don't want to be manipulative, but you also have to be able to handle objections. And I would argue that objections are a beautiful thing in a sales conversation and you want them in all of them. And so for a sales professional, I feel like that's part of it. But then I feel like another big problem that they have is that intentional follow-up is not there. And so they might talk to them once, they might send a proposal, and then they're just waiting for them to be able to respond back because they feel like, well, if I keep reaching out, if I keep talking to them, I'm going to be annoying them, and I don't want to do that. And I think especially for those who own their own business, they're really careful about that because they've built their business from the ground up and their name. That's their reputation. That's their name. So they don't want to have that connected to it. They don't want to be known as that manipulative person. So then because they don't have a framework, because they don't have a process of what they can follow through, then they're losing sales that way. So both of those, objections and the intentional follow-up, are two big things that come up quite a bit.
Absolutely. So let's look at the objections parts first. As you said, nothing wrong with the objections. So why do you dread it? What can objections be? It cannot be about, how many marks did you get in your childhood? It can only be about the product or your service or your company. Why do people then dread it so much? You talk it up in the terms that without handling sales objections, without dying a little bit inside, this is very troubling.
It is. No, I think when people hear objections, they don't want to be pushy, but they don't want to tell someone that they're wrong. And I feel like people think in order to handle objections the right way, you have to manipulate people, or you have to make them think a different way, or you have to like sucker them into buying something that they may or may not want. And that's not actually how you want to be able to view objections. Objections are good because they help us to see where that potential client is either confused or not entirely seeing the value of what's going on. And so when you know how to be able to handle those objections correctly, then that makes it a lot easier. So the very first step in doing that is validating the customer's objection. And that just does not happen. When an objection arises and someone says, you know what, I don't want to waste my money, all of a sudden we either are like, oh, okay. Well, let me send you a proposal and then we'll talk next week. Or people start trying to make them visualize how great their life could be if their problems were solved, or they like downplay it, or they try to go around it. And that's just not how it works in any conversation in any other life. When I'm talking to my husband and I don't want to do something, he doesn't have me visualize what my life could be like if my problems were solved so he can get so I can do what he asks me to do. Like, it's just not a human way to do that. And so for the very first piece, when you're handling the objection, you just want to validate. If they say, I don't want to lose my money, say, hey, the last thing I want is for you to make a bad investment. Just validate the objection they gave you. That helps to take the wall down and to be able to build trust so you can actually start to ask questions to understand where the objections are coming from. If we don't validate, we never get to that next part. And so that's the very first piece, but nobody does it.
Why?
Why don't they validate it? I think they get scared and I think they freeze. And so I think they think, okay, either I'm not going to do that because I don't want to make that potential client feel uncomfortable, and they feel like it's twisting their arm or manipulating them, instead of just saying, let's just step back and say, this is just a regular conversation. I tell my clients all the time, our goal for our sales conversation is not to convince them to buy something if they don't need it or don't want it. Our goal is truly to understand, what problem are they facing? Can we help them? Great. Let's talk about that investment. If we can't help them, how can we get them closer to the solution than when they first got on the call with us? That's the goal of a great sales conversation. And if that is your goal, then when the objections come up, it's not intimidating, it's not scary. It's that opening of being able to understand truly where they're coming from and if it's going to help them or not. And so I just don't think people validate because they don't really think they have the permission to. That's not how they've been trained. They've never heard validate. Instead, it's always like go around it, skip it, downplay it, all of those techniques. And those just don't work.
So it's the problem of the training, it's the problem of their managers, it's the problem of the company with which they are working because they do not have that permission to validate, or otherwise that, or maybe they are all the salespeople are, monks, and they do not want to tell any wrong thing to anyone. Why is the industry doesn't want them to train that way, so that they can talk about the customer? They are going and talking to the customer. They want the customer's money, but they do not want to talk about the customer's problems. Then why do companies have a product at all? Means they should go into scamming and all those things rather than doing this whole selling about products and all. I mean, that would be easier.
Well, I think I want to say people can validate. I'm not the only person in the whole entire world that only validates with the objections, but it's not usually the first go-to for people, because I think people they're nervous for confrontation. Like in sales, you have pretty soft egos sometimes too. And so you don't want to hear no, you don't want to be doing that. And so sometimes when someone says no, then you just stop. You're just like, okay, well then maybe we'll try to go around it, or we'll talk about something else, instead of just saying, I really, truly just want to have an honest conversation with you and see if this is what's going to work. And I think sometimes people are afraid of the answer of what if this is not the right solution for them, instead of realizing like it's not going to be 100% of the time. And even if they don't buy today, that doesn't mean they're not going to buy later. Because if you really learn how to handle objections well and you're serving your customers in that, they come back. They may not want that piece at that exact moment, but they usually are always coming back, or they're telling other people, I just got off the phone and that was the first time it felt like a regular conversation. It's not something that I really need right now, but you were saying that you had that problem. I think you should go talk to Brooke. Those are the things that we're creating as we want to have that service framework. We want people to still think about us when they're going to their competitors. We want people to keep thinking about us when they're talking with their other business owners, friends, family, all of that. And when you handle objections well, that completely separates you from your competitor at that point.
Absolutely, absolutely, Brooke. So the objections part is taken care of. Sales objection part, the follow-up. What is the problem with follow-up? Why they don't do follow-up? And are they scared again of the customer? Because the customer asks tough questions. They want simple customers who can be, easily convinced by even wrong products or whatever products you are throwing at them.
I would say the reason follow-up gets so difficult or it's not happening is because it's really vague. So in our service framework, we teach specifically how to be able to have intentional follow-up. And I always coach, there are two things that you need to be able to know when you're creating that follow-up. The first thing is, does my potential client know exactly what they need to do next to move forward with me? Meaning like date and time. And then the other piece needs to be, do I know if they're going to do it? If so, when? And if not, why? So just as an example, as business owners, they say, hey, you know what? The next step is I'm going to send you a proposal and I'll give you a call next week to see if you have any questions. That's not intentional follow-up because you don't actually know, are they going to do it? They don't actually know exactly what the next step is. They just know they're supposed to go to their computer and look in to see when that proposal comes through. Instead, you're working and saying, because people will say, hey, send me a proposal. And if I may, AJ, if someone just says to you, send me a proposal, that's not actually a good sign. That's their nice way of saying, I'm not doing anything today. And I just, because we're professional in our conversations. And so more than likely, people are not just going to say, no, I'm not going to do that. They'll usually say, oh, that's great. I need to think about it. Oh, send me a proposal. And that's actually not moving it forward, even though a lot of people think it is. So then they spend the time, they send the proposal, and then they're waiting. And then they call once. Maybe they answer, maybe they don't. If they don't answer, they leave a message. Hey, just seeing if you got my proposal. And then they call again. You can only leave that type of message once or twice before it gets annoying. And then, say miracle of all miracles, they actually respond and you say, hey, that's great. I wanted to make sure you got my proposal and see if you have any questions. 9 out of 10 times they turn back and they say, got your proposal, no questions. Well, now you still don't have effective follow-up. Instead of from the very first conversation, just saying, I'd love to send you a proposal. The way that we would do that is we're going to set up a meeting right now of when we're going to be reviewing that proposal in person, going over questions you have and talking about those next steps. And then I'll send it to you a few days before we meet. So what times work for you next week? That's intentional follow-up. And that's how you're able to shorten your sales cycle. If you don't have those pieces in place, you can't do that. And so it's not for lack of trying for people. You can only try like once or twice when the follow-up is vague. And then you just kind of give up. And then by the time you want to come back, now everybody's embarrassed because you haven't talked for a while. And now you're basically starting the sales process all over again, instead of continuing to move it from each piece, moving it closer and closer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now let's look at the third thing. It's about, customers ghosting the salesperson. Why do they do that?
I would go back to, a lot of times they're ghosting because it was not clear in regards to what that exact next step was. If you have a date and time set for the next one, then the ghosting doesn't happen. I would also like to encourage, like, ghosting can happen on the front end as well, where you are supposed to have an appointment with someone and then you're just kind of staring at your Zoom screen because nothing happened. I would encourage you, that's because we could have had intentional follow-up to that beginning meeting, meaning if they've set up a time, we have automation set up saying, reminding them of when things are going on. And then I always reach out. I encourage to be able to do that, to say, hey, I'm so glad you scheduled an appointment with me. I'm looking forward to talking with you. Just wanted to see what caused you to want to just reach out. It starts to open that conversation, and it really guarantees that sales conversation will take place. Sometimes it happens right then and there. Other times they're just like, well, thanks so much for giving me a call. I know that you're a real person. I know that this is going to be a good conversation. And then they're excited to be able to meet with you when that time comes. So I think ghosting happens on both sides, in the front and in the back. But a lot of times in the back, it's because they either had objections that we didn't allow them to talk about, so they ended up going to a competitor, or it was not clear in regards to what those next steps were. The other piece I would say is always just giving them grace, because things can happen. Life can happen. And so something may have really taken place. There could have been a family emergency or something like that. So if that happens, I wouldn't just write them off and never do that again. I would absolutely reach back out and say, hey, I understand a lot of times things can happen. Just want to make sure everything's okay. And if you want to be able to reschedule. So you don't want to just write them off in the beginning, but if it's happening over and over and over again, then sometimes it's just, in regards to that first appointment, sometimes people are just like, no, I'm not interested anymore.
Absolutely. And sometimes, you can trust the salesperson, but you don't trust the company he is representing. And then he or she wants to be very sure about this particular company. Or if they really need that product, you've got all the information. They are thankful to the salesperson, but they are researching product of another company whom they will trust better than this present company. Just because this company has a good salesperson does not mean that the company is good. At the end of the day, you need to deal with after sales, and that can be horrible. The worldwide it is the problem. You can't reach anybody responsible in the company. You can only reach to the bots. The bots don't want you. Nobody wants you. The company doesn't want you. They only need your money. And that experience customers do not forget. They do not forget, even if the salesperson is good. They wish that this salesperson goes to another company from which they actually buy. That is what brings me to this whole relationship building. But first, any comments on this, and then I'll come to the other question.
100%. And so for people who are truly in that situation where they are good sales professionals, but it is not a company that you back up, that is a very hard thing. And I would highly encourage being able to find a company that you really do truly feel connected to and that you support, because we have to sleep at night. And so if we're selling something and we know on the back end that's not going to be taking place, that does not motivate anyone to be able to keep going. And so I've been very fortunate in the roles that I've had in the senior living industries and all of that, where people would ask me, they'd be like, well, would you have your loved one move here? Would you have your loved one be here? And I could honestly say, absolutely. Yes. I believe in so much of who this company is, what they believe, how they're able to solve problems, because I'm not telling you there aren't any problems. I'm just telling you they're committed to being able to solve them. And so to your point, AJ, if you're in a sales role and you're selling something that you don't believe in, or you don't think is going to actually help solve the customer's problems, or you're going to sell it and they're going to go and they're going to have an awful customer experience, I would highly encourage, look for something different, because that's not sustainable. You can't just keep selling and selling and selling something that is wrong. Now, if there are problems, but they're able to fix them, then that's just any business. Like, no business is going to be perfect. But if it's an ethical situation, I would look for a different job.
Absolutely. Now let's look at the relationship part. That is where you talk about, that how to lead a sales conversation without taking all the time.
Yes.
How do you then build a relationship in this whole process if you don't want to give time to it? How do you calibrate both things?
Yes. So I'm not saying that you're not taking time. I'm just saying you're not the one talking the whole entire time. So a lot of times when sales conversations happen, someone may ask like one question and then they launch into their pitch. And I would argue we do not want to do that. One, we can't start solving a problem that we don't know that they have. If we just start automatically talking about how great our product is, we have missed the whole point of actually understanding where their problem is. And we've just assumed things, and that's not going to go over very well. And so what I mean by, like, we're talking 30% of the time, the potential client is talking 70% of the time. That's what my service framework allows, because we are the ones guiding the conversation and asking the questions, but then we are listening. And then we are asking more follow-up questions, intentional questions, to truly understand what's motivating them, what's driving them, where are their problems, where are their frustrations in their business. That's what we're doing. And so if it's flipped and I'm the one talking the whole time, I know it's not going to be as great of a sales conversation, because I'm not giving them space to be able to talk about where their problems and frustrations are. Because if they've scheduled, for me specifically, and I would say this across the board, if they've actually scheduled a time to talk to someone in regards to sales or marketing or whatever it is, they already know they're probably going to sell to me. And yet they're still saying, my problem is such that I want help with it. So it is a gift when someone is saying, hey, I'm going to schedule an appointment with you. So I want to make sure, and as I coach my clients, that we help to take those walls down, that people are able to trust us. And the best way that happens is as we set the expectations, we're establishing that rapport, and then we have good questions prepared for in advance, and we let them lead. We let them answer those questions. All the while we know, okay, then this is the next step we take. This is the next step that we take. But they're the ones that are talking the most, because it's their business. It's their frustration that they're facing. And I can't solve it, and I can't help them know how to solve it if I don't give them the space to actually talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We talked about a lot of problems. Let's look at the solutions. And that's where we talk about the service framework. What is this service framework all about? Do you have an injection that you inject and they learn everything? Tell us about this service framework of yours.
Yes. So it is called the service framework because I have a master's in counseling, and I've been in sales for over 20 years. And so I created it that way to help remind our clients when they're learning it. This is truly about your potential client. This is not about you. If true sales is truly understanding what are the needs that they have, can I help them? If I can't, what other resources can I give them? And the service framework helps to do that. And it's in an acronym because it's just easier to learn that way. And it's an acronym of service. So it's set expectations, establish rapport, recognize the problem, verbalize the value, identify objections, create urgency, and explain next steps. As you're walking through that, that's how you're able to guide. That's how you're able to lead the conversation, but not be the one that's talking all the time. That's how people are able to think about you when they head over to their competitor. And that's also how they start to thank you as they buy, because you're truly focused on, can I help you? If I can, great. This is the investment and we're going to move forward. If I can't, what other resources could I give you to be able to keep moving forward to solving your problems? That's the whole basis of the service framework. So I have one-on-ones that I can do with that. I have group coaching that I do with that, a 4-week group coaching that I do. And we walk through that. Then we also are looking at regards to what their product ladder is. We're also looking at like their sales calculator. Sometimes people are trying to figure out, especially in small businesses, okay, say I want to make 4 sales this month, but they don't really know how to get to that. And so we help them to see, this is how, like, according to how many conversations you're having, according to how many people are actually buying after you talk to them, this is what we would say closing ratio is. So this is how many people you need to talk to. So just as an example, like if they want 4 new sales and it takes 4 people to talk to in order to land a sale, then they need to talk to 16 people every single month. Those are the types of things that we start looking at as well in that 4-week sales accelerator lab, just to continue to help them to know these are steps you can take every day to be able to grow your sales. And then you learn the service framework all the way through.
Absolutely. There's much to understand about all these things. And I'm sure a lot of people would like to connect with you. A lot of business owners would like to connect with you and learn all about this, especially about the service framework. So what's the best way for them to connect with you, Brooke?
Yes, I am very active on LinkedIn, so you can hop over there. I did just create an assessment for those who are having sales conversations using our service framework. And so that is building buildingmomentum.info/assessment, and they can go there and they can take the assessment and see where their conversations are, where their strong points are, what they can work on, and that's completely free. So I'm happy to share that with them as well.
Absolutely. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ.